Hey y'all, welcome back to the garden. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time outside and I'm going to clean up some roses. I'm not doing any hard pruning until I see new leaves, but I'm going to be getting rid of some of these older leaves. And then I want to talk to you about a little bit about me, how I got here, what my plans are going forward, that type thing. I know I've spilled a little bit here and there throughout the years, but I haven't really kind of told my story, and some people I see comment on videos and they didn't even realize what my name was. So I'm Matthew, and these are 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 honey apricot roses from Proven Winners. Proven Winners is known for growing really disease-resistant roses, but I really put these through their paces last year. I brought them back with me from Michigan when I went and visited Spring Meadow Nursery. They kind of were crammed together with like 40 to 50 other plants. And then I brought them to the new home. They stayed in the shade for a little bit until I could put them in the sun and get water to them at the new place. And then they got planted and neglected a little bit. So we had a little bit of disease issues on these roses, and I'm going to come through and pull off all the foliage, because if you've had any issues with diseases on any of your plants, you should really kind of focus on removing the foliage. Do not compost it, burn it, or recycle, dispose of it. So you don't spread those diseases around. This is on root roses. All of Proven Winners roses are on root, which is really good for our climate here, because if any of the top growth dies down over winter, what springs back up from the base will be the true and correct rose. Grafted roses are sometimes grafted to a different rootstock. Most of the time it's Dr. Huey, which is a red rose. So if those roses die down to the ground, or you get offshoots from the bottom of the plant or from the rootstock of the plant, that will not be the same rose that you're growing up top as the root system is below. So let's just talk a little bit about me. My name's Matthew. If you've been following along, you may know that. If you're new here, maybe you don't. I am from Alabama, a tiny town about 20 minutes from Georgia, northeast, middle northeast, hour and a half from Birmingham, 2 hours from Atlanta. I grew up there my entire life. I went to college at Jacksonville State University, got an undergraduate degree in criminal justice. I was really interested in technology at the time and actually started out in a different kind of field, but I had always loved legal shows and that type of thing that isn't really actually the practice of law. And so I decided to go to law school pretty early on, and I went to the University of Alabama because it's my home state, and Alabama has a really incredible public law school, and I was really excited to get in there and be able to attend. In 2016, I graduated from the University of Alabama School of Law with my JD, which is a Juris Doctorate, so people who have JDs can be practicing attorneys if they pass the bar. I also, while I was down there, because I was always interested in helping businesses, decided to get an MBA as well. So I graduated also at the same time from the Manderson School of Business and got my JD and MBA in 2016. I got a job offer up here in Ohio at a big law firm, a national law firm, because the law is interesting, especially in-house work. If you ever want to go in-house, which was ultimately my goal, I was not built for the big firm life necessarily. You've kind of got to work at a big law firm. And so I worked at a big law firm for 4 to 5 years. And then I found a job posting during COVID, and I went in-house at a company here in Dayton. So I've lived in Dayton since 2016. In 2017, I was able to purchase my first home, and that is the home where I built my first garden. So a little thing to know is my grandfather was a huge gardener on my dad's side. He grew some of the biggest pumpkins, watermelons, corn that you would ever see in your life. He was really big into also grafting different fruit trees, and so you'd have multiple fruits on the same tree. And it's really interesting that he was able to do all of that because he had to leave school at an early age and could not read or write. So we often wonder like where he learned all of this information, and it had to have been by word of mouth. But I'm carrying on that tradition a little bit with all of the gardening I'm doing now. And so in 2017, purchased the first home, I really got started and moved in, and the first thing I kind of did was remove a lot of the shrubs from that garden. And as a millennial, I kind of decided initially that I was not going to be replacing any of the plants that I planted in that garden because I didn't want the upkeep. Well, the bug really bit me, the gardening bug, in 2018 maybe, or I think it was 2018, the spring of 2018. We moved in August of 2017, September 2017. So it wasn't long after sitting there all through dreary Ohio winter. If you live in the Midwest, you know winters here are usually pretty gray and depressing, that I got kind of hooked on watching some YouTube videos and learning all about certain things. Now, I initially got started with the lawn. I was really interested in having a very green lawn that you could walk in really easily barefoot. And I started watching the Lawn Care Nut on YouTube. Alan Hain, who is the Lawn Care Nut, currently lives in Florida. But interestingly enough, he is from right here in Dayton, Ohio originally. And he kind of, I don't think he started his channel when he was in Dayton, Ohio, but he did work in the lawn care industry around here. And that was just an interesting connection. And so I really kind of fell in love and learned a lot about plants from grass. The fertilizer values, NPK, I learned while I was being very involved in learning about grass and all of that stuff, and how to take care of it, how to water it, what signs to look for diseases, came really in handy when I got more interested in gardening. In 2018, I believe it was, is kind of when I decided, you know what, I'm going to start doing a little bit of renovation in the garden. And that's when I planted the incredible hydrangea hedge with the emerald green arborvitae at the last house that became so popular. I purchased those from Burns, which was a local garden center in I think it was 2018. And then it just kind of changed from there. I believe in 2019 is when I got connected with Jess from Roots and Refuge. That was a pretty organic relationship. I sent her some hydrangeas and some roses to plant in her garden, which she did. And then she reached out to me because I was posting frequently on her Facebook group, Friends of Roots and Refuge Farm. And that relationship kind of bloomed during COVID, and we've become really good friends ever since. And so all of the relationships I've kind of cultivated around YouTube and this gardening has been really organic. I'm really introverted, something, if you don't know me, I will talk your ear off if I get to know you and I'm interested in a topic. But if you ever bump into me at a garden center, it's mostly going to be that I'm pretty shy in person. And so I may not seem a lot. Don't be off-put by that. Because if I get to know you and we find something in common to talk about, I'll certainly enjoy talking to you. But it's just the personality type. And I find that a lot of us content creators seem to have introverted personalities. I'm not one who's going to be doing dancing videos on Instagram. I'm just not into that thing. It's not my personality type, but I do enjoy other people who are able to put that time into it. Really do not like the word influencer, although that's kind of been tagged on a lot of us people who do YouTube these days as we're influencers. I don't consider myself an influencer, and I don't really love that term because my goal with this channel is not to influence you to buy anything specifically. It's to create contents. Sure, I show you lots of plant videos and that may influence you to go to the garden center and spend some money, but I'm not showing you things that I would not plant myself or products that I would not use myself. So I prefer the word content creator, educator. I'm really obviously interested in education. I've been educated my entire life, 2 years of preschool, kindergarten through 12, 4 years of undergraduate and 4 years of law and business school. I have gone to school almost my entire life, and it's just something I've really enjoyed participating in, is educating people. For the longest time, I thought I was going to be a college professor, and that's not something that I decided to pursue after I started my law career. I really kind of wanted to get out there in the real world. But for those of you who are teachers and professionals who teach. I commend you for what you do every day, because it really makes a difference in lots of people's lives, including my own. Now, I do have a full-time job, so content creation is not my full-time job, as I've mentioned several times. And I do this primarily because I enjoy it. In high school, I was a yearbook editor for several years, and that's where I kind of bloomed and grew a love of photography and purchased my first camera. And then in college, in undergrad, I took photography courses from a brilliant woman named 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 whose father was an attorney. And actually one of my first internships in undergrad was at a law firm. And that's where I kind of really fell in love and knew that my future was in the law. Now, I'm not any kind of special attorney. I'm a corporate attorney, so I like to say I push a lot of paper. But we all have certain, jobs that may seem insignificant to some people, but is actually really important for protecting and helping develop business. So I'm not really sponsored by anyone on this channel. It has been a very organic process. Started out just making videos, and had some very early on people complain about how much Proven Winners content I was producing. And at the time, I was not sponsored, and I'm still not sponsored by Proven Winners. I just really love their plants, and a lot of their plants grow really well here in Ohio, and so that's a lot of what I buy. Now, a couple years into it, I actually purchased a lot of things from Great Garden Plants. They connected me with Natalie from Proven Winners, and I've been able to go to like their creator retreat last year, but I'm still not sponsored by Proven Winners, and I will continue to buy their plants. I also have organically developed a relationship with Heirloom Roses. I purchased roses before I became an ambassador for their brand this year. All of the garden centers that I've worked with, I was customers prior to. So it's been a really fun way to organically build a channel. I'm not going to be out there telling you you've got to purchase all of this stuff to build a beautiful garden, because realistically, you don't need a whole lot of tools but your hands and maybe a shovel to build a beautiful garden. But tools do help. So if you ever see me showing any products on this channel, it's because I've really enjoyed them and they've made my job gardening easier. You'll often see me showing like the beehive watering system. Not sponsored by Beehive, never have been. I've purchased all of the products I receive from them, but because I'm a really big nerd, honestly, I really love automation to help make the garden grow. And while the growth of my channel has been pretty organic, because I'm just not out there as an introvert reaching out to a ton of people, developing lots of connections, just kind of sit back and like to educate and learn and let this process be slow and organic for myself. I have really enjoyed it. Now, I do work with Proven Winners some now, and they send me some plants from time to trial. But none of that comes with any strings as to say, this is an excellent plant, this is what it's done for me. So those are not sponsored content, and I'm not getting paid to do those. Those are simply trial of plants and provide my honest opinion, which Natalie from Proven Winners seems to have indicated she enjoys, because not all plants are made for all gardens and all locations. So if something doesn't grow well in my garden, it might mean it's not going to grow in your garden 10 streets over or in Southwest Ohio in general, depending on our soil conditions, irrigation, rainfall, lighting, seasonality. It's all different all across the country. And so while one plant might perform well in my garden, it might not perform well in yours, and vice versa. All right, I've pruned up these roses. Let me show you what they look like, because right now I'm not concerned about trimming down the branches so much. We're going to trim these pretty tough in maybe a few weeks. I'm going to wait until some of the buds come out a little further before I start cutting down on them. But you can see here what I'm working with. I just kind of snipped off all of the foliage that was diseased. I'll probably continue raking up some of this down here below the stem, so we don't have any of those bad leaves left over and carry disease into spring. And then in another few weeks, after these buds start pushing a little more, you can see they're getting kind of big there now. I will come back and cut this back pretty hard, because it's really like great for on root roses to cut them back really hard in the spring to help them develop their root system and push new growth. If you're in an area where your roses are already growing, I'd highly recommend you check out Heirloom Roses webpage, and I'll put a link to it below, because they have produced a really excellent video on pruning roses that I think is really good educational content for anyone, and I've watched it myself the other day, and it would be really valuable for you to watch if you're into roses. So let's back up a little bit and go over the creation of this channel. So I connected with Jess from Roots and Refuge Farm, and we talked, you know, for about 1.5 years, I think, before I started my channel. And she was just kind of like, you know, you have a very beautiful garden. I had an Instagram at the time. It was mostly my personal Instagram. And she was like, you should really consider starting a YouTube channel. And so I did. And probably the worst absolute time to start a YouTube channel, a gardening one at that. And that was in the December of 2020. So it was the first year of COVID. That spring, I'd become really anxious to expand the garden, because I'd done a lot of planning over winter. And then, if you remember, in 2020, when lockdown was announced, a lot of garden centers were not opening. And so I'd done all this planning to create some big bed spaces, including all of those around the willow, planting all of my Pinky Winky hydrangeas that spring. And I was really concerned that all of my plans for that spring had just been dashed, because I wasn't going to be able to buy anything from the garden centers. And luckily, the garden center, 𝗟𝗶𝗶𝗲 that I was going to at the time, was allowing online ordering for pickup. And so I was able to pick up a lot of what I planted that spring at 𝗟𝗶𝗶𝗲, which was really good for me, because I was able to further develop that garden in 2020 when we were all isolated at home in the evenings, during lunch, and on the weekends. Then Jess convinced me to create a YouTube channel, and so I created it in the end of November, beginning of December of 2020, which is not a great time, like I mentioned, to create a gardening YouTube channel. There's honestly not a whole lot to do in Ohio in winter, because it is so cold. But I kind of got started in the spring, got off to a good start, and before summer rolled around, really, I had my first 1,000 subscribers. And if you've been here since that time, I thank you, because the content at that time, I don't know how it was, but I got there. And after the first, I think the first year, I had around 5,000 subscribers, which I never expected to happen. And it's just kind of grown from there organically, around 7,000 to 8,000 subscribers a year. And it's been really fun along the way. And I grew the garden. I doubled the size of the garden at the last home in around 2 years, after I would have done that anyway had I not had a YouTube channel. But it was really fun to share that progress with all of you. That is Veronica, by the way, what I've been pruning. I'm not doing a whole lot of cleanup. There's actually not a whole lot of cleanup to do in this garden, because I didn't plant a whole lot of perennials last year. But I did plant that Veronica, and it needed to be cleaned up a little bit before spring. It could have been, because it's not actually protecting the crown of the plant. If it had been like a hosta or something, I would have left it. But Veronica was fine to prune. So as I mentioned, one of the reasons I like producing content is for the educational reasons. I am the kind of person that will go online to look at any product that I'm going to buy on YouTube before I buy it. Either how it's unboxed, which is kind of interesting videos sometimes, or just the features, and make sure that it's going to match the use case that I want it for. I'm not someone who buys into cheap products just to satisfy a need that I have. You've probably noticed that I don't buy into things that are necessarily trendy so much. I want something, one, if it costs a little more, that's fine, but it's going to last longer for me. I want the most reliable thing. It may not have all the fancy jazzy features that some other things do, but I don't want something that I'm gonna have to replace and throw in the trash next year. Now, having grown up in the country on around 10 or more acres most of my life, and not really having any neighbors, living in a subdivision was never for me, but it was the home that I could get at the time in 2017 when I was looking for one. Last year, I had on Zillow a filter to search for any property over 5 acres for probably years, and there was nothing serious about moving. A lot of the houses on bigger acres need a lot of work. Not to say that this one doesn't need a lot of work, but for some reason, on a Friday, I'll never forget it, in June, I was working from home and I got a Zillow notification about this home, and it had just been listed the same day, and I really wanted to come look at it. Really beautiful, kind of matched the style, had lots of great property. I'd prefer probably more than 5 acres. Don't really want to take care of more than 5 acres, but it was in the country, the kind of life that I grew up living and was used to. And so decided to come out, no intentions to necessarily purchase the property exactly, since it wasn't really in the market to purchase one. But we put an offer in on this house and ended up, we weren't the best offer, but we ended up getting it. And that left very little time to prepare for a move. Now, a lot of people have been watching my videos from last year wondering why I didn't take more plants from that garden. And honestly, if I had known I was moving an entire season or even 2 months in advance, I would have probably pulled up more stuff from that garden and taken it with me. The reality was, we made an offer on a home and it was accepted, and we were not in the position to buy a home without selling our other one. So we had to immediately get our property listed for sale. And I spent an entire week, because that's all we had before the property was listed, getting the house cleaned up. And when you list a property and people start coming to look at a property, you generally do not want to be removing things from that property, and that includes plants. And so while I did dig up and divide a few things here and there, I didn't take anything of substance from the garden, because frankly, when we were moving at the end of July, it was the hottest weekend of the year. And so I was going to get a few more things than I did end up getting, because I just knew I had nowhere to take care of them and that they would probably die. Now, although the purchasers of my prior home and garden loved the garden, they are not gardeners. I've seen that question a lot as well. And so what that means is when the spring comes up and they have to start doing maintenance on all of that, I don't know how they're gonna react to that. I've asked them that if they decide to dig anything up, or if they just do not want something and want it gone, to let me know. So when spring rolls around this year or in years in the future, it's possible that I may be going over there and digging up some of the things I planted by hand. I've also seen that people would say they could never leave a garden like that. And maybe if you grew up in a subdivision and had lived that way your entire life, maybe that would have been your forever home. For me, it was not a forever home. And I expected it honestly to be a home longer than it was, but 2017, the market was kind of down. It hadn't necessarily fully recovered, and we got a lot of equity out of that house because of the rising cost of real estate. And it allowed us to put all of that equity into this new house, and it was really a good deal for us at the time. And I say all of that to say that after I listed the last house for sale, and we actually got an offer the day before it was supposed to go live, and we accepted that offer because we were just under such stress and concern that the house wouldn't sell. Because honestly, you don't know if the beautiful garden that you've built is an attractor or a detractor for anyone looking to purchase your home. I thought it would be an excellent way for someone to come in with a beautiful garden. But honestly, the real estate agent really had me worried that it might be very difficult to sell our home because it's a lot of work and a lot of upkeep. Now that garden was a lot of work in the spring and fall, not a significant amount. I did it working a full-time job, but it's also got to love someone who likes the outdoors. But because I had invested so much in drip irrigation, the garden, other than in the fall and the spring, kind of took care of itself, which was nice. And I did have a very hard time leaving that garden. There were many days after I realized it kind of set in that I was leaving it, that I would go outside and just kind of get teary-eyed at the thought of it. But it's also been an excellent opportunity for me to stretch, you know, my design skills, learning about taking care of a bigger property, and also, while it may seem like a lot, starting over and building the garden better, the new one better, and learning from all of the mistakes that I made in the previous garden, things I will recreate here, things I will not do again because it was a little too difficult to take care of. So this space you see behind me, this bed, you know it's brand new. This is a brand new bed. There are hardly any perennials in it other than those veronicas and a few grasses that I just showed you, because last year I focused on planting trees and some shrubs. There'll be more shrubs that I'll add this year, but I'm going to focus on getting in all of the perennials that I've showed you I've ordered and some of the annuals before I start tucking shrubs in here and there. That way, after everything leaves out, I know how it's going to perform, make sure everything came back okay. And then we'll get going from there, head on into planting season with lots more shrubs. So I hope you enjoyed a little history of how I got here, kind of what I do, a little more background, a little more personal than what I typically share on the channel. But all that being said, there's a lot of garden content to come this year because there's just simply a lot to do in the garden this year. One of the hardest transitions I've had at the new place is, now that I am a content creator on YouTube, come spring, other than building a new garden, which is really interesting for a lot of people who are new and learning how to start something from scratch. It's not something that I was able to shoot in the last garden because half of the garden when I started my channel was already developed. So this is something that everyone can watch and see from scratch, a garden really from the ground up. Because at the last house I ripped out almost every plant and bush and everything that I had at the old garden to start a new one. Here I did the same, almost. There's a few select nice things I left, like these Japanese maples here on the corner of the home. But otherwise, everything was replaced at the old home, and here, very similar, although there wasn't actually much to replace because there wasn't much of a garden to begin with. But not having anything necessarily to show you in the spring that's really beautiful has been really difficult to me. I've worried about it all winter of what this year is going to look like, because everything that I'm planting is going to be so small. There's not going to be any really beautiful, gorgeous hydrangea hedges that are 4 and 5 feet tall and wide with huge, beautiful blooms to show you. And I'm going to work really hard on planting those things. So by fall, we can maybe have some nice things, or next spring. But I'm hoping you'll follow me along on this journey as I walk you through designing all of this space. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I'm going to this spring, summer, and fall. And it will go by very quickly, I know. I have so much to do and it keeps coming around. I keep adding to my list. I'm trying to do a lot on the front end, like trimming a few things here and there, because those are hours that I will be able to get back in April and May when I really need to put in full afternoons or full days on the weekend to get some of these things planted that are coming in. And so any little task like this I can do in the meantime means more progress later in the season. Thank you guys for joining me, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.